The next thing, just to finish, before we move on to the sort of the final stage of it, is returning to what we mentioned earlier about the ESP aspect of Stanag, whether Stanag teaching is English for specific purposes or whether it's not. And within NATO, this is perhaps an unanswered question, as if you go to Garmisch, where you have the school for teaching future teachers, in terms of the Stanag levels and criteria. Um, the attitude of many countries when you start speaking to different people there, and from the Bilk institution itself, which is the NATO institution which governs the whole Stanag language system. Um, I've heard it mentioned several times that Stanag is not an ESP as such, and that it is something which is basically just a general proficiency level, and theoretically anybody, regardless of whether they're military or not military, should be able to come and take a Stanag exam and pass it at a particular level if that is what their proficiency level is. Um, Obviously, within the Polish scenario, and a few other countries in Europe, generally Poland has already taken the attitude that it is an ESP, that it's something that military topics should be and are included in the exams at all levels, apart from level one. Although level one does sometimes have a flavour of military to it. And as we go up the levels, it would definitely, I think, majority of civilian exam takers, if they'd had no aspect of familiarization with Stanag and with the military vocabulary, I think majority would struggle unless they were, particularly proficient. But I think they would struggle because there is this obviously level, and I think something that Jarek mentioned earlier in terms of when he was talking about the differences between private and state teaching, and we talk about the sort of the buzzword of stakeholders. And if we look at when we're thinking of our stakeholders, and so whether they be the units themselves, whether they be the military as a whole, or an individual member of the armed forces, they want to learn something within a particular sort of realm, and they want something that is useful for them. So I think they come to Stanag with an expectation that they're going to learn something military, and that they're going to um, use words and vocabulary that mean something to their environment. And I think it would be, from my perspective, it'd be wrong to remove this, and that on the. I mean, this brings us to maybe the question that we've also mentioned earlier. Anya mentioned about the lack of materials, and the fact that because there has always been this sort of crossover, ESP, not ESP, um, sort of very few pieces of sort of material have been over the years prepared. So for years, in many countries, the Macmillan series of campaign books, for example, was used, but this was not specifically governed towards Stanag itself, and definitely not towards a particular system. And so the Polish system had one way of looking at the exams, and the German may have a completely different way of looking at the exams. And I think a lot of teachers, because of this sort of ESP aspect to it, and the fact that some teachers feel maybe that they don't know enough about the military, then maybe there is also a fear to actually create materials. And I think that's something that some very sort of well qualified and creative teachers could have many years ago created material, but there was a fear of, like, well, I don't really know enough about it, or it's not my speciality as such. And I think that's something that has held the field back, and is something that needs to be sort of, now I can see In the time since I started creating the books a few years ago, there's now more and more online, and there's now a competition to to the books, which is good. And I think that more places are starting to create their own materials. I won't mention them quite now. Maybe I don't want to advertise them too much, but have definitely found them available online, and this is definitely a positive aspect. And it seems to change after a sort of a many years where there was definitely a lack of material, and now there seems to be more being created. Teachers are being more creative, creating their own materials, but also creating books and material for purchase. And so, to wrap up what I'm saying about ESP, I think it is, in my view, it is an ESP, although there is obviously, like any ESP, fundamentally, I think any ESP is 89% general English with just a little bit of extra stuff, whether it's medical or what have you. Um, I definitely encourage anybody to create their own material and to try and sort of diversify the available sort of content out there. And the more the merrier is probably the best way of looking at it. I don't know how my two colleagues feel about that.
Um, yeah, well, I have this thought that actually, well, from my perspective, the Stanag level 2 should be more ESP because well, Stanag 4 basically includes everything, so it's above, I would say, above the ESP. Stanag 1 is a bit basically too low. On Stanag 2, we want our students, the graduates of this level, to be able to communicate in also at work. And I think the language resources at this level, this intermediate level, are still very limited. So if you lack this, for example, you lack the specialized vocabulary, you will find it difficult to communicate. You're, if you look at ourselves, as teachers, there are some people who are 100% civilian, never been in the military context, but still they are presented with a military text, they will understand it. Somebody who's level 2 will not, and the particular vocabulary may actually help them. So I would say, contrary to what I've been taught, when I started working in the military in the 1990s, when the philosophy was first teach them the general English, then when they're good enough, you may try some military from time to time. I would say no. I'd say we should follow. Actually, it's like those business English textbooks. We should start at a fairly low level because actually the worse linguistically, those who are not at a good level will need the specialized language more than those who can cope with anything. That's my thought here.
Yeah, well, I would also add that if we all agree that it is an ESP, then maybe maybe there would be some like also higher requirements from the teachers because actually, well, uh, I believe that it is a really specialized vocabulary, and it's not only about vocabulary actually, but about the whole structure of working in the army and so on. Yeah, for me it was really difficult at the beginning because I'm like 100% civilian. Yeah, and actually my students also teach me something about the life in the military. Yeah, I also ask them questions about their professions. What it actually involves and so on. And I need to study on my own. But not every teacher is like as involved as me. And if we've got like too many poor teachers, then also okay, maybe there will be more materials. But what about the quality? Yeah, I think that always the quality is the priority. And maybe if like everybody agreed that it is an ESP, so maybe then there would be some national courses for the teachers that you need to pass it if you want to teach that. Yeah, well, that's actually my dream. Yeah, so that uh, then there will be some maybe standard. Yeah, because now there are so many teachers who try to go into the standard exams, but they actually don't even care like to no, I don't know. They don't even know how the model exam looks like. Yeah, they just heard something about standard exam, and they agree to help. well, it shouldn't look like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I like your idea because then the MOD would have to think of some financial incentives
Yeah.
for English teachers to actually choose this career
That's
path
right.
to,
Yeah.
prepare for those exams and then pass the
Yeah.
exams. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
like
Right.
your ideas.
Well, I mean, in terms of if you had a certificate, and it was to be both for private and state, etc. I mean, I wouldn't see it necessarily as something that would be an expensive thing to run from the MOD's point of view, because it could be like a type of sort of validation for private teachers to say that I've got the certificate. And so it's not that they have to necessarily pay people to do the course or something, but it would be a point where
Mm,
a private teacher could say,
mm,
I have this certificate, I am a Michelin star, sort of
mm.
teacher, etc. And so, yeah, I definitely think it's something that would maybe benefit, and this standardization would definitely be a good idea. In terms of then, if we move on to some of the final sections to talk about today, so the next topic we've got is the success stories, and where maybe actually sort of things do work well when we're teaching. So Anya, I think you've got something to tell us about that.
Well, of course, I would say that different things work with different people, but maybe something that I can say it is some kind of a successful story is that when, as I said, students sometimes reach out too late, and somehow I manage to prepare them for the Stanag exam, and they like actually pass at the first attempt after only like a month or 2 months of preparation. Yeah, and then at that point, actually, I'm not sure if I'm more proud of them or myself. Yeah, because it's like the power of a good lesson plan. Then that works really well. Yeah, so that's the only thing that comes to my mind. Yeah, yeah.
No, yeah, I mean, I think there's always these last minute, like you say, preparation, but that goes back to what we maybe mentioned earlier in terms of their general level, and whether they came to you with a proficient enough level to start with, and you are just teaching them the sort of the format of the exam and what they should do. Or, like you mentioned before, you may have someone who came to you with an equal amount of time, and their level was just nowhere near good enough. And so then they wouldn't be on your success list story, presumably. Okay, so in terms of the next topic, we want to finish with talking a little bit about the future of Stanag teaching, and the Stanag system to a certain extent. And so, to start us off, Jarek, do you want to say something about level two and sort of foreign language and second language skills?
Yeah, so now when we were talking, even now you mentioned the fact that actually you very seldom have conversations with other native speakers on level 3. Now our understanding is that basically level 2 is intermediate, level 3 is better, and that's if you're a non-native speaker, that's how you understand the language. My experience from the university is that we actually discussed, we discussed things like, there was, post-structuralist literary criticism, pretty abstract things, and I could discuss those things. The problem, actually, it was more difficult for me when I came to the US to sometimes discuss some pretty simple things, than discuss those lofty abstract ideas. So we have, as non-native speakers, we have a totally different experience of language learning. I mean, non-native speakers. Well, there are non-native speakers who just immigrate, for example, to the target language country, and their experience will be similar to yours. I think they first learn the everyday stuff. Buying, clothes in a supermarket, whatever. But to us, it's not. It's reading books and so on. So and that actually leads to some misunderstandings. I remember again being on one Bill conference where I think it was a Slovenian officer who spoke about training JTAGs. And that's a buzzword because as a JTAG you need to be able to communicate simple things very precisely and very effectively. That's not level 3, according to the descriptors. But the Slovenian officer said that in I think it was Slovenia. Never mind which army it was precisely. But he said that in their army, those JTACs are always level 3, even though they follow standardized forms or formulas. You have to be prepared for the unexpected, so you may need to get out of the prepared format, and then you will need to use your language resources. Still, what they will do is simple things. They will probably provide basic, the disposition of friendly enemy forces, and the location maybe of possible civilian areas. Simple stuff from the perspective of level, of the Stanag descriptors. But you have to do it very precisely. And again, as a native, as you know, as a native speaker of Polish, I would again actually, share the same view as this Slovenian officer. That for me, somebody doing this kind of job should be level 3, despite what the Stanag descriptors say. That's
Yeah,
my view here.
I mean, you're right that obviously, if we analyze the specific job of what JTAC, for example, does, then yeah, it fits the level 2 descriptors. And I think, I mean, as we mentioned earlier, in the fact that if we look at actually what jobs in nature require level 3, and then we cross-reference that with the descriptors and stuff, there is I think definitely a certain confusion of what is really level 2 and what is level 3, and who really needs level 3 and who only needs level 2. Because in my opinion, many people in the military need a solid level 2 where they can feel. This goes back to what I was talking about earlier about fluency and confidence, and it's a solid level 2 who has this confidence and fluency, and is probably a better than a sort of a hesitant level 3. And that quite often, yeah, if we think of, if level 3 is they're able to deal with abstract scenarios, well, very few people are going to need that. And so yeah, there is maybe this sort of slight misconception of, I think many people, and this goes all the way sort of through the system, top to bottom, in the fact that many people think of, well, if you've got level 3 must be better than level 2, and therefore I like everybody to have level 3, or therefore I would like to be level 3. And yet it's, yeah, for a lot of people it's just not a necessary skill. And level 2, I think it should be sold as a sort of a more attention should be given to level 2, I think, in many places, and that people should be sort of rewarded in the sense of that a solid level 2 is a good standard. And this is something that, if you are level 2, you, like you say, this, you'll be able to deal with many situations that you face. And whether JTAC, I mean, I would struggle to think of a scenario where the JTAC guy would need his level 3, because most of his radio conversation is like literally 10-20 seconds worth of information, like you say, giving very specific, even if everything has gone wrong in the mission, you're still giving very factual information. So yeah. Okay, so let's move on to Anya. You'd like to say a little bit more about AI and maybe the sort of the twists of AI.
Well, yeah, well, like to sum up, well, for sure, we need to accept AI. Yeah, so for both the teachers and students. So teachers should use AI because we really don't have to spend so much time in preparing materials. But also we need to realize that students use it like every day to do everything. Yeah. So like really the chat GPT is their best friend. So of course it changes everything when it comes to giving them some homework, for example. Yeah, it's pointless today, really. Yeah, most of them won't do it, especially if they're like military cadets who are busy and so on. But also, I think that when it comes to the future of the Stanag exam, who knows? Maybe in the future they will take actually the Stanag exam, online. It is possible. Yeah, now it started to happen in many universities. And also, I would say that well, hopefully in the future, it won't be about Stanag exam, but about preparing soldiers for life, simply military life and everyday life. And I think that the main problem with the Stanag exam is that soldiers who pass it, they simply forget about English. Yeah. So, like, what's the point? Yeah. I think that it would be perfect if English was like part of their everyday life. So they should have actually classes like they have the physical training. They should also have English. Yeah. Uh, that's it. And then it would have much more sense for sure. Yeah.
Definitely. I think the fact that people pass it and forget about it, and then 5 years later want to do the next level or something, and yeah, it is an issue definitely that I think any teacher has experienced. I mean, in terms of the what you're saying about that, homework is basically a waste of time nowadays. I mean, if we go back to what we said also about the private and public sector, I mean, at least with the private sector, you would expect that the person's paying themselves, and so they want to get something for their money. I mean, in the public sector, yeah, I would agree. It is a real problem today where people just manufacture texts, answers, and the teacher has basically no control on it because it's done in a matter of seconds. So yeah, whether it be homework, but even classwork, students have telephones and tablets with them all the time, and trying to control it. And if again, it goes back to the question of whether they are learning a language for the language's sake, or just to get a particular certificate, or to pass out of the academy that they're in, or something. And if their only goal is to pass the academy and they don't care about the language, then AI will help them do that. And it's it's something that has occurred over the last couple of years, obviously, with the onset of this sort of age that we're in, or whatever to call it. And it will only get worse, I think. And I honestly don't see, other than obviously, banning all electronic items. But then again, is that a road we want to go down either? So that nowadays everybody uses computers and telephones all the time. So it would be strange that your English lesson was the only time when you couldn't use it. So that would also, I think, be rather,
Yeah, but it's not, sorry to interrupt, but it's not only a problem during a lesson, but also during an exam. Yeah, because now you know how to control all those students. Today a smartwatch can be like a small computer. Yeah, so you can actually do everything with that. So as you said, it's really difficult to control it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, definitely. And this is, I think, going to be a challenge for everybody, from the institutional sort of organization, like you said, of exams, teachers, examiners. And I don't know if I don't think I have any answers at the moment as to how to deal with it, but it's definitely part of our lives. I mean, what you said earlier about whether the exams would be done online. I mean, Poland's one of the few countries that actually they're done in paper format. Majority of NATO countries actually have done it not online as such, but they on secure computers. They go to a particular testing center where there is a computer. So it's, I mean, the fact that we make, for level 4, for example, they have to write 500 words. That's the only time they've probably written 500 words in one go in like 20 years. Most people these days, I don't write by hand, sort of more than maybe 3 or 4 words. I don't know. It's not a skill. And so in a way, we do have an artificial exam system, because we're, it's a language, but also, I said, the actual physical writing of it, especially when we get to the longer texts. So whether that will disappear in the future, um, I I mean, it brings us to maybe the point of the fact that, at the moment, we've got obviously the requirement for all officers to have level 3 in the military, which is something that other countries don't do. A lot of countries do it on a case by case basis, where they, if a particular officer needs a particular level for a particular appointment or deployment or something, they will go and get tested for that particular level. Whereas Poland has, for, well, for at least 15 years, if not longer. I can't remember. Gone the other way. We're saying that everybody needs that level, and then they already have that level. They don't need it for a particular appointment. Whether that will, with the increasing of the military, I mean, the military over the last couple of years and for the next year or 2 years will continue to increase in size. Whether we get to see a point where it does become just unmanageable to test so many thousands of people, and they will go to a similar system to in other countries where it becomes more to do with appointments and deployments, which would reduce dramatically the amount of people, especially at level 3. Maybe that is something we will see in the future. I don't know about what either of you think about whether that will be a possibility.
Mhm. Yeah, the military universities generally want this basically this level 2 to be introduced. One advantage of this is that actually we would probably have a little bit more realistic level 2. I think the Czechs and the Romanians who only end their cadet training at level 2, I think they provide them with this better level 2. So when the problem I mentioned is probably there, could be solved in this way. The advantage of the system as is now is that um, you know with some students probably a lower, probably just some of them, it may help with the problem Anya mentioned, this lifelong learning. I mean, the reason why I posted this my own material from the BBC rather than something from Łódź. One was I was worried about the copyright issues, but more importantly, I wanted to demonstrate that you can actually encourage students to. I mean, once listening to the English language media broadcasts becomes a habit, I think this may actually it may actually stay with those soldiers much longer than I mean, after they have passed the exam, and this could help them preserve the skills they've attained to pass the exam. That's my hope. I have no way of verifying this this theory, but since I like to learn about the world affairs, watching or listening to English language broadcasts, I think many of my students do too.
I mean, I think it goes back a little bit to what we mentioned before about um, attitudes to language, and also what you use in your own native language. And unfortunately, it may be sort of a cliche, but I think there is quite an element of truth to it that people do read less generally in their native language today than 20 years ago, but also less television and less radio in terms of news. And so, in my experience, if when I talk to my younger students, which is frightening to think, but people who are literally half my age, if even younger than that, they don't listen to the news in Polish about Poland. And so then to try and get them to listen to the news in England about the rest of the world is something that, it's not a habit they're into with their own language. And so on one side, maybe we just have to accept that that era has gone and that it will never come back. Because although I definitely, obviously agree that listening to the news, and I tell my students all the time to listen to BBC, to Sky News, to CNN, etc. But if it's not something you do in your own language, then trying to do it in a foreign language as a habit, because it's different to do it in a one-off, but as a habit, so that you would just do it naturally and pick up vocabulary naturally, I think is incredibly difficult to try and get people to do. I don't know. I mean, if either of you have managed to do this with your students.
Well, yeah, especially that students today have got really short attention span, yeah. So that's why like the platforms like TikTok are so popular, because like probably the videos there are like 1 minute, 2 minutes long, yeah. So it's difficult to give them like a material which lasts like 10 minutes, yeah. For them, it's like the whole day, yeah. 10 minutes. Yeah, I imagine who would watch our podcast. It's so long. Today, people don't like it.
Well,
They
hopefully,
like
I will put in
they
chapter
like to be,
markers so they can
yeah,
jump ahead.
they think to be short. Yeah.
But I would say there is a minority, not just among the professional soldiers, but also among cadets who actually are interested in those international affairs. That a couple of days ago, I was just walking down the corridor of my military university and overheard two cadets discussing, the issues of the American presidency. So I would say this is a minority of our students, but well, I think it's still worth, at least they would be worth the effort. I think.
Yeah, but also I think that the Stanag exam is really special when it comes to all those resources that we use that are actually interesting, yeah, and to really learn about the world. So actually, I really enjoy reading all those texts and listening to all those recordings, and my students actually they like it too. Yeah, so yeah, that's something like I think it makes the Stanag exam special. Yeah, that it's really interesting and really thought provoking. Yeah, there are so many topics to talk about. I would say that every short text or listening gives you some idea to talk about. Yeah, which is really perfect.
Okay, so maybe on that very positive note of what is Stanag, and we will leave it for today. So, my guests today, Anya and Jarek, thank you very much for such an interesting and I think fruitful discussion. And I look forward to any comments we get in on YouTube, and we will think of what maybe to talk about in the future at some time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.